Well, we've reached a critical stage of our EG4 setup for our critical loads backup center, and that is we're about to turn it on for the first time. And when you do that, you have to set it up for monitoring, and I am going to attempt to set it up for monitoring via Android, even though there are tons of reports that Android does not work very well. So we'll try it on Android, and if that doesn't work, then we'll have to try it via iPhone. And I currently have the battery communications cable disconnected because the startup instructions say initially to have this off until you can get into the configuration to set for the type of battery you're using. And we're using the outdoor EG4 280 amp hour outdoor battery. So let's see what happens. First thing we got to do is fire up the batteries. So to power up the batteries, we got to start with the first battery, then the second battery, then the third. The manual says to do it about 5 seconds apart. The key is to make sure you've got your ID, your dip switches set. So you got to take this plate off and set your dip switches. So this is our master battery set to 1. This is our second battery set to 2. And this is our third battery set to 3. Now the first thing you got to do is throw the breaker in the back, which I will have a close-up of a still shot. So we turn the breaker on, and then we press this switch in, and it'll stay indented a little bit, and then it should start to boot up. Now a key thing you have to do beforehand is I have a charge verter, and you need to charge each one of these individually to 100% before you can interconnect them. So this is number 1 battery, number 2, number 3. Had to charge them all the way up because they ship them at about 50%. You want them to be the same voltage when you connect them together. So we're ready to go on this one. Let's turn on the next one. Again, the switch will stay in. And the battery doesn't stay, the little symbol thing doesn't stay on. The menus don't stay on very long. So before I turn this one on, I'll reposition the camera. So this is what it looks like when you turn on the last battery. Turn on the breaker. Turn on the switch. And the switch does stay in slightly. Does take it a bit, doesn't it? And it actually says it's discharging even though the inverter isn't on, because if there's a slight imbalance between the batteries, this battery might send a little bit of power to the other batteries down the line. So eventually they both come to a stable standby state. So again, the instructions say the very first time, don't plug in your battery communications. That's going to go into this port right here. But that will be after we've got some configuration done for the type of battery. So we're now ready to turn on the battery switch. And now our lights came on. And we got a warning. Probably that there's no battery communications would be my guess. So we still have our warning light going with a blinking normal. I'm gonna have to go defer to the manual to see what that means, but my guess is we don't have connectivity yet. So we go to our Android app here, go to settings for Wi-Fi, and there should be a network that matches my dongle ID. And there it is. So we click on that. It connected right away. And so now we should be able to use the EG4 app. Dongle connect. Hey, it's working. So now we need to pick the network we want to go to. Put in the password. Setup successful. Dongle will restart later. So I think we're basically ready to restart it, and we'll see if we get an error. So we did connect successfully. All 3 lights are on, and we should be able to now see this in the software. Before we go inside and see how successful we are in getting reporting, I'm gonna turn this off and get our battery communications connected. So our lights are off. For now, I'm just gonna route this up through the DC connection, because again, this is just temporary, just to get everything configured. And now we should be able to hopefully get no error messages. No, still blinking normal with a warning light. But let's go inside and see if we can see it in the software. So when I came inside, I could see my system. It showed up at the station at the top. It did not show me these amperages for the bus or anything like that. It did not show all 3 batteries. So, my first view of the software was, yep, it saw the dongle. It was connected to the internet. That aspect of communication was working properly, but it just wasn't working properly. So I called Signature Solar, told them I'm starting up the system for the first time, and they said, well, we need to go through a few things, do some maintenance, probably a firmware update. So go to the maintenance menu, do a read. It actually reads all the things from the device. I actually had done that before calling them, so I knew it was communicating. But it was not reporting any firmware to me. It wouldn't report the date properly. It did show a few settings in here, so I knew it was communicating, and it would show the name, but I couldn't get it to do anything. So the very first thing that they said we're going to have to do is the firmware update. And that was going to take it, depending on the speed of my internet connection, could take me 20 to 30 minutes. We do have high-speed internet, but it would not show any firmware version at first, right? So it's right out of the box. For whatever reason, my system was not showing a firmware version at all. Maybe there was other communication issues. So I could just click on remote update, and it would pull up my system and show what serial number was for the dongle, the system, etc. And he just had me click on standard update. And while mine's up to date already, so I can't do it twice, it basically said, okay, there is an update and it will take some time to do, and it'll restart when it's finished. So I told it to do the firmware update, and then in the window to the right of this, it showed me how it was progressing through. So I could watch, it's slowly ticking through the percentages. And it did take, while I didn't time it exactly, it did take 20 minutes, maybe it took a 25. I don't remember exactly, but it seemed, of course, when you're starting up something new, it always seems longer. So I did just let it run, went off, got a drink of water, got some coffee, whatever, pat the dog. And eventually it came back as completed. I went out there, turned off all the batteries, turned off the inverter again, turned everything back on, and then stuff started to slowly show up. So I started getting some data off the charts, showing that there was some power going somewhere. I just had some lights plugged in initially, and just to make sure it would supply AC power. So I could step through this stuff and start to see things. Once it was online, then the Signature Solar person went through all the menus under maintenance to see what was going on. Now, The reason it drops down like this is because I was turning things off and on. There was an internet outage for a while. So did have some kind of weird things in the charts. We'll have to get into charts over time if that's of interest. But basically, you're running your own power company with this thing. And it just shows you, how much power you got. Once you got solar, it'll show solar power coming in. But once the firmware is up to date and the communication cable is in and the dip switches are all in the right position, you should be able to see, because I have 3 batteries, 600 amps for the bus limit and 600 amps for the charger. And then below you'll show 3 batteries, because I have 3 batteries in that communication chain. If you only have 2 batteries, then there should only be 2. But it took a long time for the batteries to show up. So even after the firmware update was done, I turned everything on. It sat there and I'm like, it seems like there should be some battery information there. And it was just blank. And there also seems to be a bit of a lag. So if I go out there in the garage and turn all this off, this still reports everything's live for a while, like 3 or 4 minutes worth of live. So this is not exactly a real-time reporting. But once it's all up to date, it would show me the firmware version. It started to chart. I could see, what was going on. Is it charging or discharging? But the other odd thing was batteries. I had set it to lithium, and here EG4, right? You'd say, hey, yeah, I got lithium and EG4. And the technician told me, nope, don't do that, because I called him back after the firmware was updating because it wasn't communicating. And he's like, nope, you want to set that to lithium and set it to battery type 1. So maybe there'll be another firmware update where that gets fixed, or maybe EG4 is for the small 100 amp batteries and not the 280 amp hour batteries like I've got. I don't know, but that was something that seemed odd to me, that I need to just set it to the non EG4 number 1 as the actual battery type. But things have been working pretty well. It's actually been almost a week since I recorded this. It's slowly dropping down in percentage because I only have some small lights running on it, so not a lot of load at the moment. This is just going to be our emergency backup. But all 3 batteries are reporting what they're doing. It's kind of drawn down relatively evenly now that they've been on for over a week. So I'm pleased so far. It's been able to run my space heater. I only have it running some small LED lights at the moment just so that it's running something. So you probably just need to dig around in the menus yourself once you've got yours to decide how you want yours set up. Again, mine's going to be an emergency backup power supply for our critical loads panel down in the basement. I'll probably film something with it hooked up to that, running the microwave and running some lights in the house. But this was just, get it up and running, make sure all the batteries are communicating, make sure the inverter's working properly, and, just make sure that it's communicating out to the web. So again, I can now see this. This is via my PC. And by the way, the Android app on my tablet, I was never able to get it to connect to show this kind of stuff. I actually had to use Chrome on my Android and just log in like just a regular web browser. That worked. So if I did that, it worked. It would show me version. It would show all these maintenance things you could do. So don't use Android app to try and do these things. You need to use your browser on Android. But that way you can go through the standard maintenance and confirm you're up to date and everything with your Android app versus a PC versus an Apple machine. Just don't use the Android app to try and do this stuff. So hope that helps. Basically, it'll step through the update. You'll be able to watch it go through. I'd give it a few minutes after it's all completed and then shut everything down and restart it, and you'll be good to go. Hope this helps. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm not an expert yet, but I imagine I will be. I'll be digging into this more as we start to use it to back up our power here in the house. Have a great day, everybody.